Welcome, everybody, to this week's Menlo Midweek podcast. We have Phil EuBank on, our lead pastor, as we're diving into week 4 before the Bay. Right now, we have Jubilee on.
What's up, guys?
And he is one of the secret sauce people that helps bring stories to life, helps collect pictures, helps edit a lot of the things that we put out on the weekends as well. And I just want to shout him out and shout his team out. And Jubes, why don't you tell me a little bit more of some of the work that you have on deck for Christmas and how others might be able to get involved with that?
Yeah. So just like Mark said, my title here is a film and video director. So that entails pretty much all the videos that you might see on the weekend on social media. I pretty much handle all of that, as well as some pictures now. So currently for Christmas, we have a whole bunch of stuff. We have a kids shoots coming up where we are going to be filming some kids that come to the church and just asking them what their favorite Christmas memory is. So that's going to be really fun. That's going to be a really fun video. So, and then we have a Christmas Eve bumper that we'll be shooting sometime soon in the future, so planning all that. And then we're also there's so much happening Christmas Eve, so it's gonna be a lot, but it's gonna be very exciting. So
Jibs, if you had to choose some skill sets of people that might be able to help you out in the future, what does that look like? Is it anyone that has video experience? Could it be someone that doesn't necessarily know how to use camera equipment or editing equipment? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of all. I started doing video by myself and learned just by myself in YouTube, but having someone that could help me learn faster made me love it a lot more, or made me learn faster, because I did that with youth and worship. So I think I would love to be that person to be able to mentor you if this is something you're interested in, or you're just getting started in photography or videography. And as well, even if you're experienced, maybe you've been working in the industry for much longer than me, I would love to have you on my team, because I could learn so much from you and your experience. So
awesome.
That entails also video editing, filming, photos, anything that is in the creative world when it pertains to video and photo. Like if you're in that realm and you just want to also use your gifts for God and just help us out, I would love to have you on the team. Definitely.
And something really cool that Jubilee is doing is helping out with some of the students in high school ministry as well, middle school ministry, helping mentor some of the people that help create some of their sermon content for the weekends, because they actually have a team of volunteer editors that help turn around some of those videos that they play for their students each Sunday. So that's really cool that you're doing that. And from someone that is marginally okay at most of the stuff that you do, I think another big need for our team collectively would be if someone that's there is just hey, I might not know how to run a camera, or I might not know how to do this, but what I can do is help organize things or be there on the day of a video shoot to help go through the run sheet that we have and make sure that everyone's on track. That person's super valuable too.
Yeah. PAs, producers, you guys, shout it to you, because we are not organized people and we need them.
So we need those people for both Sundays and special shoots that we do throughout the week. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, we'd love to hear it. Or if there, as we were talking, there was someone that you're like, oh, that person would be cool, let them know. Let them know that we're interested. Let them know that we are just so blessed by our volunteers already.
Yeah.
And it's really our ministries are made possible by the people that help us do it. And so if you are interested, or someone that you know is interested, you could text our team at 650-600-0402. Give Jubes some props and some shout outs if you see him at some of the campuses, or if you see a video online, say, nice job, Jubilee. And now let's go ahead and jump into this week's podcast. Well, welcome everybody to this week's Menlo Midweek podcast. My name is Mark.
And I'm Phil.
And we're just chatting about cars and watches and other fun things.
That's exactly right. Yep. If you're listening, I was telling Mark about the Lamborghini that you just got and how I can't imagine driving those kinds of cars as I would have it in a vault. I wouldn't touch it. I couldn't imagine touching it. Can't imagine.
You made some car references this past weekend in your message. You've always been a car guy too. You've alluded a little bit to that.
Yeah.
What was the car that you wanted to have in high school, because I think we've talked about your Need for Speed car that you did have in high school at some point. You could go back and listen to that episode where we heard about Phil and all the fun electronics that he put in his car that always drove very responsibly.
Always.
What was the car, or what are some cars that you're like, ooh, that'd be fun to own?
I mean, I think back then it was, I had friends that had Civics, like early 2000s Honda Civics.
Yeah.
And I always really liked those cars because they were almost like kit cars. You could do whatever you wanted to them.
Right.
You could pull them all the way apart.
Yeah.
So I really liked those cars. I had a buddy that we used to work on it was a Audi S8.
Cool.
That was a really fun car that I always really liked. So like that sort of style and like that type of car is fun, 5-speed, 6-speed manual.
Yeah.
Those were always really cool cars for me. I also had a buddy who had a used he had an older used BMW 325. And we like stripped it all the way down and turned it into a track car. So removed all the weight you could possibly remove from it. So that was a really fun car. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really like my car now. I drive a Model Y. I don't really mess with it. I think like my life is so different that just the idea of, hey, this kind of doesn't work, and I have kids that I have to get somewhere. I'm like in a hurry. That stuff changes, So I think that the type of car that I always thought I would have eventually in my life that I've never had, don't need, but would still want, is actually a pickup truck. Okay. Several times in my life, I thought I was going to buy one, and I like looked at it when I was looking at other cars, and they're just so expensive compared to other cars when you're looking at them like for like.
Yes.
That I've just never gotten one, and I didn't need it. Like if anything, it would be kind of inconvenient for me.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that ever changes, but I do like cars. They're fun, and being able to kind of grow up a little bit in the golden age of like modding cars was pretty fun. So
you say that, yet you still have Cybertruck on your wish list for this Christmas.
Right. Yeah. Our kids.
It's different. It doesn't count.
Yeah. Our kids, they like hate. That's not true. One of our kids thinks the Cybertruck is cool. Every other one of our kids is like, it's the ugliest thing ever. Yeah. And I'm like, I would buy one or I would drive one of those if somebody bought it for me right now. Like, I think they're so cool. I do think you have to get it kind of wrapped.
Yeah,
like
you have to do something with it.
It's got a refrigerator vibe if you just stick with the stock.
Yeah.
But like matte black wrap, or there's like a blue urban camo that I just think they look cool, and they're fun on the inside. I think that I just respect Tesla for having the guts, because normally when a car like that gets shown, you're like, by the time this gets released, it's gonna look nothing. It's gonna look like an F-150. Like there's a reason that all these companies make the trucks that look the same. And so for it to come out and basically look as crazy as it did when it was demoed in 2018 or whatever, was pretty cool. So
interesting.
I like cars.
You do.
Yeah.
We got a text in question that I can't wait to pass on to you.
Yes.
So I just can't wait any longer. It has to do with Tesla, AI, Apple Intelligence.
Perfect.
Any concerns, or should people upgrade their phones to get Apple Intelligence? This was basically the question that was passed on of like, what is it? Help me understand it. And if you are just coming into this AI conversation, maybe some of our older folks that are listening, what are some hesitations around it and what are some benefits to it?
Yeah, I think that probably the most conservative approach to AI is the approach that Apple is taking. So it's mostly, there's two ways typically to do AI. AI, if you don't know what it is, essentially leverages like a whole bunch of information and kind of guesses what you need, either based on information it already has or on information you've given it. That's like the most reductionistic, simple way to explain it. One way to do it is all of that lives somewhere on the internet. You're asking that big source of information, it's giving you stuff back. And if you use the free one, they're actually using your queries to help train the model. So you are actually kind of the product and the consumer of it. The way that Apple is doing it is much more both on device, so like never leaves your phone, as well as like a private sort of highly locked down version of when it goes to the cloud, it's not going to the internet, it's going to like dedicated secured servers. Also, their features are really limited right now. So it could be something as simple as you go get or a bunch of friends text you, you have not been paying attention to the text thread, which honestly happens to me all the time. And then I look at my phone and it's like, you have 74 unread text messages. I'm like, do you guys have jobs? That's what I think. And what Apple AI can do is it'll say like, hey, your friends were talking about this, this, and this. And if I'm like, cool, I'm good, I don't even have to like check that thread anymore. So that's an example of AI taking a bunch of information, using this like pretty firewalled in example of how to give you a small slice of it. And then the next one that they're going to release likely is basically like it'll allow you to change your pictures a lot. So you could say like, I want this, if you take a picture and there's a random person photobombing the picture and you're like, I want that person out of the picture. Samsung has a very powerful version of this, and Apple's sort of starting to work in some of those types of tools. So you can decide whether or not only if you want to update, but even if you update, you don't have to turn on Apple Intelligence or their version of AI. You can leave it off if you want. I do think it's probably the currently most protected and insulated. And then the stuff that they're doing with AI through OpenAI, that's even more complicated. But it's probably fine. I think the thing that I would say to people is if you go, I don't think I want to use AI, but you're like indiscriminately using technology and the internet, you're already using AI. So when you go to Google, or if you are like an Adobe user for some reason, almost all of these big major products are already building AI features into the product. They're not necessarily flagging them as clearly as Apple is doing right now. But I think the people that are like, I'm not going to use AI, I bet you already are, and you probably will. So the thing I would just tell people to be careful of is when you use AI, whether it's an image that you give to AI or data that you give to it, just go like, just treat it a little bit like you're uploading that data to the internet. And if you're like, I wouldn't want the internet to have this picture or to have this content or to have this information, don't give AI that information, especially on a free account, because you're going to train the model with it. So
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
There you go.
And you can flex your AI muscle a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. We did was it this last week? We did a thing for our denomination. Shout out Josu.
Yeah, dude.
And for some pastors in our denomination, talking about how we use AI at Menlo, how I use AI as a pastor, and then shout out Eli Tan. He's a journalist with New York Times, and he's doing like he's doing some sort of special article or something about how faith leaders are using AI. So, I never really thought that it would be something that I would have any sort of authoritative voice for. I meet with a group of leaders every week, and we do like a cohort about AI. And I feel like they look at me like it's cute that you're a pastor and know the phrase AI, like because they're so smart about it. But I guess in ministry world, we're doing some stuff that other people aren't doing. Hopefully it's helpful.
And it's cool too to see the impact that it can make for community as well. Which is whether that is creating your own version of a study guide or your own questions to lead your life group through, or create a 5-day devotional for yourself. Like those are all tools that are readily available in the same way that you would type out that sentence. In about that same time, you will get a 5-day devotional. And so it's cool to see if you do lean into it, the ways that it can help, but also it's good to approach it as well with what information are you feeding it, and how are you protecting yourself and your family in that process.
Absolutely.
And community is what we talked about this past weekend, Phil. Talked about staying rather than going. This is our 4th week of our For the Bay series. And I think this is a unique pressure point that a lot of us feel, especially those that have been around in the Bay Area for a while, about just the level of transience that comes with being in the Bay, and how that affects relationships, how it affects community, and how it affects growth, whether that is personal growth or growth because we don't have people around us in our lives. And run us through your message, Phil, and then let's dive in.
Yeah, I mean, we've been obviously talking about different ways that we can be for the Bay to make sure that our communities know that we really do care about them, because God loves us and loves them. And so we want to respond by loving God, but we also want to respond by loving people. And so we've been looking at small slices of that, couple weeks ago, we kind of did a post-election, what does this look like to hopefully show up well and be an agent of reconciliation even in a divided moment. Javon did one that was really about like, how do we think about this as being for our neighbors, like caring for people who are right near us.
Yep.
And then this last week we talked about really, I think one of the key anchors of being for the Bay is choosing to stay. And I think that it's really easy. I think that we have a transient culture, and I tried to make that case.
Yes.
Just in general. Like in the West, it's easy. You know, I talked about the difference between how many jobs someone had just a couple decades ago versus how many jobs someone will have now, what cohabitation looked like as a way to sort of jettison lifelong covenant of marriage to convenient contract until it's inconvenient in cohabitation. So I don't want to make it seem like the Bay Area is the only place that deals with this, but I think the Bay Area is a unique place in the way that this shows up, because I think that part of the Bay Area, it's like a feature that I show up to the Bay Area and maybe I go to school here, or maybe I come here to work in big tech, and there is this interesting career lottery ticket of I'm going to come here for school maybe, or I'm going to come here for big tech. Once I've gotten some big tech experience, I'm going to do a startup. I'm going to work 1 million hours. By the time I turn 35 or 40, I'm going to cash out either through somebody buying my startup or through it going public. And then I'm going to become like venture capitalist or do something else, and I can do that anywhere, so I'm going to leave. It's almost like the professional athletes of tech, right? So it's like, I know I need to do this into my 30s, and then I'll have infinite options for the rest of my life. But I think what it does is it creates, if we let it, really shallow community where nobody has really been around for more than a year or two, and as a result, all of our friendships, all of our community is just on this regular rhythm of flipping over and flipping over and flipping over. And I get it. Like, there are all these pressures about why it might be attractive to go somewhere else, like why it might be easier. But we just talked about sort of, I referenced that book from Daniel Grothe, The Power of Place. We talked about how important like just choosing to be rooted in a specific spot is. And then we paralleled back to Philippians chapter 2, where Paul is really advocating for why he's not just staying with the Philippians, he's staying on earth. Like he's choosing to stay committed and challenging them to take their faith personally and seriously, and then really giving us a snapshot of what it looks like to be faithful, to choose to stay, and not just be present in a moment culturally and swept up by the wind, but he talks about let's do all things without grumbling or disputing, that we would stand out as blameless and innocent children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. And so just talking about that power of what happens if when the going get tough, the tough choose to stay. And I think that I hope for people that are hearing this, if you think, well, do I want Silicon Valley or the Bay Area to be my long-term home? I hope you'll consider it, because I think the influence of this place, the culture of this place, and the people of this place are worth it. And I also think that, that line, the grass is always greener on the other side, the real answer is the grass is greener where you water it. And so there's plenty of people I know that have moved either from California or from other places to a place that they think will be circumstantially better, only to discover that their same habits of isolation, their same selfish desires, their same narcissistic tendencies leave them just as dissatisfied, looking for what's next in the place they go to as the place they left from.
As I hear that, my mind goes to the thought process of someone saying, I moved here for my job. I moved here so that I could make something of myself. Once I've done that, I'm good. Can you help make an argument for, one, maybe how God can be lighting that path and taking someone to a place, but also the importance of saying, I need to factor in my community around me as part of what I should focus on as I'm here. Not just careerism, but also what impact am I making outside of that?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think that, community is one of those things that I think we really undervalue. When you move from one place to another or from one job to another, we have all these mechanisms about how things within our job can move, right? So, hey, I rolled over my retirement when I came to California, right? So I wasn't leaving all that behind. I got to take it with me. Or, maybe your physical possessions. You're like, I'm going to bring all of those with me.
Right.
I think even if you maintain good long distance connection with past friends, your community, sort of the social capital of what it is to be rooted, you're starting over every time you get up and move. And I think that there are unintended consequences of that. If every time I moved or every time I started a new job, I financially went back to zero, it's not just that I'm going like, oh gosh, I have to navigate how to make ends meet again. It's that because we do that rollover, over time you have this like compound interest of even when I go somewhere else, the money that's with me every 7 years based on a specific rate of return is doubling. And like, that's so cool. I'm glad I get to do that. I would say it's at least that much, if not more, in our relationships. So it's not just that when you go somewhere else, you're starting basically at zero with relationships. It's that the relationships you had, all the compound interest that you'd sort of earned in social capital, all of that is gone too. So you're not just starting over in year one. You're starting over in year one with sort of that cumulative compound interest of relationship, social capital, and local influence that maybe you had somewhere else. And I think that there are lots of examples where this is pretty easy to spot. And we short circuit our own development. I did student ministry for years and years. And one of the things that was kind of fun about student ministry, especially if you're working with high schoolers, is every 4 years you had new students. So you really didn't need to have more than 4 years of content. I mean, I did, but you were kind of like, hey, like we that you guys, none of you have heard this before. And I think that there is, to a certain extent, if you move every year or two, I think there's a level to which even the way you show up relationally, like you have 1 or 2 years of relational capacity because you're just like every time you're having to, you just get to start over. Like they've never heard that joke. They've never seen you do that trick. They've never gone on that trip with you. And so I think recognizing there's a personal depth of relationship that only comes with time. And I think fooling ourselves into thinking that a lower cost of living doesn't come with a greater cost of community is a foolish trade, in my opinion.
Yeah. I want to add to that a bit, too. When I moved here in 2017, that was to get married to Missy, which is great. Started working at the church around there. Praise the Lord, yep. We would move every year or so from apartment to apartment to small home that was in the family during COVID, another home during COVID, another apartment after that, and then finally into the place that we are now. And even now, when it comes when that year mark comes around, there's something in my mind that's like we need to get ready to move. Totally. Like we gotta do something. And so I wonder what that does to my soul. Like I wonder what the move here, if it was a truly like I'm gonna get here, I'm gonna grind, and I'm gonna get out. When that get out time comes, when that expectation I have in myself to say I've reached my goal, I've done my job, I've got the experience that I needed, I made the money that it will take to get me, to where I wanted to go. What that does to me and in the time that's overlapping between then and now.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that there just is a personal cost to it. There's no doubt about it. And there are times that you're going to move. Like that's just a part of life. But I think that the more times, for us, we had college and then grad school and, there were these little markers where, we had shorter stays in places. And I think it did take kind of breaking out of that and being like, no, we're going to stay through the slump. We know this is difficult. We know we haven't normally been in a place this long before. And I think there's something really fruitful if you're willing to press through.
Yeah.
I also think the idea of specifically the Bay Area, it's not just, hey, is it expensive? I also think there's this idea for some people of, I want to be around people that agree with me on more stuff. And I think that's also a dangerous, like we're a pretty tribal nation already. People have these echo chambers that are really reinforced and they don't need help. Like, I don't think we need to go, let's do this even more. So I think being able to hopefully say, all right, so what does it mean for me to take a step back and to really understand my neighbor that voted differently than me, my coworker that sees this issue, this person, this conversation radically different than I do. God loves them unconditionally. And he's planted you as a missionary in your neighborhood, at your school, at your job, to bring hope to those places. And I think when we moved to California, there were people that were like, oh my goodness, you're going to California? And I'm like, man, followers of Jesus, like, we can't just leave the state. Like, some of us are called to go there and love people well. And, the church throughout human history, we've run to the places that need the most hope, not from them. And so if you're a follower of Jesus and you're going, well, California is hard, I would say, man, all the more reason to say, all right, Lord, I'm here for it. And sort of the steadfastness and resiliency that we see in Paul and the Philippian church, I hope, is an inspiration to us today.
Yeah. How can we start to see ourselves as missionary? I think that's key in kind of the thread that's leading us from wanting to continue a transient path, especially if we are part of that statistic that are, millennials have 10 to 15 careers. Some of that could be here or not. But what does it mean to start seeing ourselves as not just the worker, the guy that moved here for work, or the family member that came to move back in with parents or something like that, but to say, no, like, if I'm a Christian here, that means that God isn't done with me, or this is part of my story strategically.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I would say is, are you praying for people in your life? And I think that there is a fatalism that can come into the life of a Christian in the Bay Area where it's like, I know the people that I work with or that I live with or that I go to school with or that, are near me that are Christians and we're cool. But the other people, they're so closed off to God. They're so far from God. If they ever want to come to church, I guess I'll take them. But they're not really going to become Christians. I think if you're not praying and believing that God can do something in their life, it's pretty hard to own the mission of the church. To be able to say, I really do want to bring the hope of heaven to the hurting of the world, I think it starts with praying. And if you have a neighborhood, I think one of the easiest and most powerful ways to do this is get to know the names of your neighbors. And as you take walks in your neighborhood. And as you're walking in your neighborhood, pray for your neighbors by name. And if you get to know them, like we have one neighbor who recently she lost her dog, and so they got a new dog, and it's pretty tragic and sad and hard. And I know that they're like grieving that loss. They're empty nesters. It's a really big deal. And so like I'm praying for them as they grieve, and that in the midst of their loss, that God would meet them in a way that they can't explain, so that they might find Jesus through this moment of brokenness, right? And I think maybe for you, that's the halls of your school. Maybe for you, that's the halls of your office. Maybe for you, you're a work from home person and it's the rows of your Zoom meeting, But I think that the fastest way to change our heart is to just pray and say, God, would you do this? Would you please do this? Would you use me to do this? Would you show me opportunities for conversation? I think that's really, really, really important. And then, leveraging key moments. We're about to experience one around Christmas. Yeah. You've heard me say this before, but listening for these 3 knots when somebody says to you, because you'll ask at some point probably, hey, where are you guys going for Christmas? Are you doing anything for Christmas? Are you going to a church service for Christmas? And if somebody says, oh, we're not in church right now, or they describe something in their life and they say, we're not prepared for this, or they just say things are not going well. Like, you just listen for those 3 knots and then just to be able to say, our family, or I would love to have you sit with me for Christmas Eve services at our church. No pressure, maybe grab a meal with you before or after, but like easy. I think looking for praying and asking God to move their heart as he moves your heart, and looking for strategic pockets and opportunities for conversations like that throughout the year, I think it can move the needle more than you realize.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. And a lot of what you're describing was a very relational approach to community.
Right.
So one of the biggest, one of the most common threads or common things that I would hear when working with young adults in the Bay Area was this idea that relationships always felt transactional. And that was just part of the culture. It could be part of work culture here or startup culture here, where it only felt like people wanted to be your friend if they could get something from you.
Totally. Yeah.
So how can us not doing that, what difference do you see that making here?
Dude, I think that when we show up differently than that, it's really startling. And there may be people that when, at Menlo, we use this language of being unhurried friends, that because Jesus was so interruptible, he was patient, he would sit in the space with people. And, you just think about times where, one of the most powerful times, Jairus comes to Jesus and is like, my daughter's dying. And he's like, let's go help her. And then this woman touches the hem of Jesus' garment, and this disease she's had for years gets immediately healed. And in my mind, I'm like, let's go. And Jesus stops the whole crowd, is like, who touched me? And his disciples are like, everyone touched you. We're all around you. What are you talking about? And then he has this like kind and patient conversation with this woman, then eventually goes and actually brings Jairus' daughter back from the dead. And I think there are these moments like that where what does it look like? We're probably not bringing Jairus' daughter back from the dead, but what does it look like to just demonstrate to people, I'm willing to be an unhurried person? That may mean that I work different hours. That may mean that I have different like rhythms in my life where instead of always sitting in my backyard, I'll sit in my front yard. That may mean that instead of having headphones on at a coffee shop, I don't, right? Like, I just think there are these little things that if we're willing to do them, you may be surprised about the doors of relationship that open. And I think that God can do some really good stuff, not just like for other people, but for us, like for us as people. We are relational people. And like I said, there may be people that are kind of going, hey, I want a thing from you. And the moment I know I can't get that thing from you, I don't want to know you. That's fine. Like that. But the Bible talks about people of peace. We want to be people of peace in the communities that we live, work, learn, and play in. And I think if we are, God's going to use that to help shape and cultivate those relationships. So for you, maybe there's like a time that you rush in, and I'm terrible at this. Sometimes I get it. Like, hey, instead of putting my mobile order in on the app, I'm going to like go stand in line at a coffee shop because there's going to be a person behind me and a person in front of me, and I can say a kind word to them. And honestly, like, we have no idea what hangs in the balance of that person hearing a kind word. Like, with as much isolation as we all have, who knows what they are going through, and we can just be an agent of peace in that person's life. And so, I would be curious from your perspective, having been here for 7 years, what have been, like, I know relationships are challenging in the Bay Area. What have been the things that have maybe broken through when they have broken through to disrupt this sort of transactional relationship dynamic in the Bay Area?
Yes, that's a great question. I think some of the things that have led to those breakthroughs have been consistency and trust. And that can be really hard if your learned thing with relationships here is you're going to move away in a month, or you're going to move away in a year. Yet still trying to be vulnerable, still trying to lean in, and finding people that can not only agree with you, but also make you better and challenge you in certain ways too, I think was extremely helpful for us. So we were able to meet with a few different life groups throughout the years. And that's when I talk about the consistency thing of we were in someone's home for a meal every other week, whether that was ours, whether that was theirs, and whether that meal was some crazy thing that this person cooked or DoorDash that we had delivered. But it was more so about the time in which we got to spend together. And once you break the walls down of saying, I don't need to say I'm okay, or I don't need to give my blanket answer of what I would say to coworkers or whatever else. But
Yeah.
when I can actually get down to some of the things that are challenging or hard, that opened opportunity to get past that transactional feel that relationships can sometimes have and get into a lot of the not just relational, like, it's not just relationship, it's like almost family. Because for a lot of people here, we don't have family here.
Yeah, yeah.
Missy's an exception.
Yeah.
Like, her family is all born and raised in San Mateo, and that's why we're here. But for a lot of people that I've met, they're moving out here with no one, not coming to family, not coming to friends, coming for a job, coming
that
for
gold
something
rush
else.
vibe still.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is. And so if you can find people that feel like family,
Yeah.
what that does to making making it feel like it's okay that I'm here and I want to be here. I'm not looking to get out. I'm not looking to leave. It really did something that was like, it made it feel like this was home and not just the place that God brought me for now.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. And I think I think there is an underlying temptation that all of us have, that community and the location where we live are supposed to be easy.
Oh, yeah.
And like in my experience, it's just never that.
No.
Like, I've lived in a bunch of different places. Part of that was because of the home that I grew up in. Part of that was like school and ministry, but no place has been easy. And all of them come with trade-offs. And so being able to acknowledge that the rosier you have invented a scenario in your mind of the dream that you're thinking about, likely the more blind spots you have about the way that you're thinking about it, right? When you're like, oh man, this place has like such low taxes. You're like, yeah, there's probably a reason. Like, maybe think about it. Look at some of the other implications of being there. Look at the relational toll that it might take in your core right now. But being able to say, it's going to take investment and work for me no matter what. And, I think in California, some people go like, well, if I stay here, I can never own a house. And I think like that's a very real thing that I don't want to minimize. But I would also say you don't actually know that. Like, who knows what God may do. And being a passionate, faithful follower of Jesus and being an American pursuing the American dream are actually two different sets of values. And so if you go, well, I'm entitled to this kind of a house, this kind of a neighborhood, this kind of a car, these kinds of vacations, this kind of financial margin, maybe, but if we set the American dream on the top shelf and we say, God, I'm willing to follow you anywhere as long as I get all of that, well, you're following a God, but it's not the one you think. And if leaving California or leaving wherever you live is a part of chasing something on a higher shelf than God in your life, I would warn you against doing that.
Yeah, that's wise. And the difference that, we talk about how the Bay Area is one of the least Christian spots in our nation. And so if we just if the cycle is we're like everyone else, then that will likely continue.
Exactly right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes when I go teach other places, I'll just say, I came to you from the future. I'm in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And what is happening in the Bay Area is you think about technology, think about fashion, think about culture. It kind of starts out here and then it spreads. And that's one of the reasons that I think, man, if the Lord could do something in the Bay Area over the next decade, the same power to spread something like AI, what would it look like if we were spreading hope at that same rate?
I love that.
So
Phil, all of this talk about relationships, community, it just jumps my mind a week and a half forward to when we're around the dinner table at Thanksgiving. Can you encourage us on, how to enter into that space, how we can be lights there, how we can be a presence of God, maybe in spaces that are very difficult and challenging? I understand that, for some, Thanksgiving is it's not a fun time.
Yeah.
And it's a time that feels obligatory to fulfill some sort of tradition. And so how can we encourage people that are feeling a little bit weary about that?
Yeah, I think first I would say if you are going to a Thanksgiving meal that feels like it's going to be tense and stressful, I I just encourage you, in as much as you can, don't go to it alone. Maybe that's you and your spouse. Maybe that's you and a significant other. Maybe it's just like you and a friend.
Yeah.
But I think not feeling like it's a million against one, I think is really helpful. And somebody that you feel maybe a level of relational safety with in the room, I think is really good. I can tell you that, like say I go spend time with my in-laws who are great and I love them. But like I know the potential triggers that exist for my wife with her parents, right? And so we can kind of talk about that in advance, and I can kind of have her back, and I can be on the lookout, and we get to be a team in that setting. I think in as much as you have that, that's really helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, whatever like conflict or fight has taken years to build, it is not going to get resolved over the stuffing this year at Thanksgiving. So the idea of like, let's just be like these relational anarchists at Thanksgiving this year and see what happens. Like, it's going to make it worse. And so understanding that, I would always say lead with curiosity and not judgment. Extend empathy, that especially this year, you're going to have people around the table who are going to be processing like this most recent election, and they're going to be devastated and furious that someone could vote differently than them. And then you're going to have other people who are elated and just can't believe that somebody wouldn't see it their way. And maybe you find yourself in one of those groups, or maybe you find yourself somewhere in between, but just not like pouring gasoline on one of those. Being able to be a non-anxious presence with some backup in the room for you. And I think a lot of times, at least for me in those family gatherings where I feel like I get to spread hope, is not in like a, hey everybody, and I'm a pastor, so in those settings it's always like, hey Phil,
Phil, can you pray?
Would you pray for us? So, but I don't preach pray, I just pray, and
just God is great, God is good. Let's thank Him for the food.
Yeah, a quarter turn more than that, but similar.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think it's the times where I'm sitting down with someone I haven't talked to in a while, one-on-one, and there's like activity happening in the rest of the room, and I just say, hey man, like, how's it going? It's been a minute. How's your year going? How are you feeling? How's your family? And someone that chooses to dispense more than pleasantries, and I get to hear what's going on, they get to hear what's going on, and usually it opens up a avenue to stay in touch more than we have in the past. So I'd say look for those pockets too, not where you're trying to solve for the whole table, but individual relationships.
That's great. Thanks, Phil.
Of course.
Anything else before you wrap?
I think I would just reiterate, the Bay is a place that has more going for it than you think it does. And, I gave these like 3 ways that we benefit from stability, and, roots, like we dig real roots. We find recognition because people see who we really are. And there's a refinement that shapes and changes us. And I would say the roots, recognition and refinement that exists in the Bay Area is actually like kind of supercharged. Like, if you're willing to invest in this place, I think there's disproportionate, like the compound interest that comes with it, because everybody else is leaving. Not everybody else, but like because a lot of people leave, the people that choose to stay, I think actually you gain social capital even faster. So if you're thinking, man, I think it's time to go, I would just challenge you to ask and maybe determine, is that the Lord telling you that, or is that convenience, or is that the American dream on a higher shelf than God is in your life? Because the costs of moving are more than the boxes in the truck.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Phil.
Of course.
And if you have any questions, prayers, need encouragement, we'd love to be that for you. Maybe you're feeling anxious about the week that you're heading into, or the trip that you have to make for this Thanksgiving. We've got a team that meets weekly and a team that's available through text that can pray with you right then on the spot. So you can text our team at 650-600-0402. Phil, thanks so much for being with us.
Of course.
Rob, thanks so much for helping out with the recording. Thank you. Thanks to everyone else, too, that is helping make this online team and online ministry possible. We really cannot do the things that we do without you. So thanks very much. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you soon.
See ya.